been waiting to do a video on protein, simply because I wanted to gather the information. One of my biggest problems with Walter Longo and his longevity diet is he has stated in an interview that, quote, a high protein diet has no health benefits. This is certainly not the case. A high protein diet is extremely beneficial for obesity. Also, now this is the thing, a high protein calorically restricted diet is helpful to treat obesity. The other things that were studied, there was a school in Scotland, a university in Scotland that did research. Now the thing is, what you need to note is they did research on individual amino acids. However, the following amino acids, which I wanted to write it down to get it absolutely correct. And this is, again, remember, I do not restrict leucine, and here's why. The three that were associated, the three that were associated most with reducing arterial stiffness were glutamic acid, which is glutamine, leucine, and tyrosine. Now, these, except for leucine, tyrosine and glutamine are not considered essential amino acids. However, if we look into what's called the triage theory of aging, Dr. Bruce Ames' triage theory of aging, we know that we need all the nutrients present. And I like to say, people don't understand this. People think that protein is a macronutrient. Protein is a macronutrient, but amino acids are micronutrients by definition, because they're needed in much smaller amounts, not grams but milligrams. Now the thing is, a lot of people will go, oh, well then I should eat more meat. In fact, one of the studies actually says, oh, you should eat more meat. No. Meat is associated with many health concerns. Most likely due not only to the fat and the fat and cholesterol, the saturated fat and cholesterol, but also pesticide residues, antibiotics, all that sort of thing, and also methionine. Getting too much methionine. Now, methionine is necessary to process fats and to detoxify the liver and things of that nature, but too much methionine will cause an increase in mTOR, which increases the aging process. Now, the amino acid profile of my pea protein, my now pea protein, is the essential amino acids are histidine 590 milligrams, isoleucine 1094 milligrams, leucine 2009 milligrams, methionine 211 milligrams, phenylalanine. Now remember aspartame, I made that video on aspartame. Phenylalanine, one of the key ingredients in aspartame, is in almost every high protein food. It's 1,322 milligrams in my pea protein. Threonine, 936 milligrams. And tryptophan, 211 milligrams. Valine, 1,183 milligrams. Now for the non-essential amino acids, alanine, 974 milligrams, arginine, 2,030 milligrams, aspartic acid, 2,822 milligrams, cysteine, 358 milligrams, glutamine or glutamic acid, which is also in MSG. Remember, MSG is glutamic acid and sodium, 4,286 milligrams, glycine, 986 milligrams, proline, 1,248 milligrams, tyrosine, 895 milligrams. Now what my point is that you can obviously, I drink 4 of those shakes a day, which is somewhat high in sodium. However, being that I follow a whole foods diet, my sodium is not too high from other sources, because sodium is primarily in processed foods, and you need about 2 grams of sodium a day anyway to function properly, or at least most people do. I made the mistake of going on a low-protein diet, and going on a low-protein diet basically resulted in obesity for me. Well, not obesity, but being overweight, and overly fat, I should say. Now the problem is, when you have people, even Walter Longo, who I greatly respect, the longevity diet is a greatly respectable diet. When you have them saying that a low protein diet is the way to health, and then you have people doing it without mentioning methionine. Now Walter Longo does mention methionine to some extent, but most people do not. But that's because Walter Longo is a gerontologist, or a juventologist as he calls it. But what you need to understand, other amino acids, for example, glycine. I take glycine every day. Glycine in of itself mimics methionine restriction and imparts longer lives on mice. Now, glycine in and of itself is a geroprotector, and I take it. I'm not telling people what they should or shouldn't do. If you have kidney disease or something like that, be careful with a high-protein diet. Don't do anything unless you talk to a doctor or a certified nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not one of these carnivore people on here telling you I can cure your ills with magical diets. But the fact of the matter is, what you need to understand is you do not need to be on a meat-centered diet to reach these protein requirements. But in the same sense, vegan doctors that are saying you don't need to worry about protein, people like Dr. McDougall, people like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I believe Dean Ornish is one of them. I think what really should be stated is that everybody should worry about getting enough protein. Whether you're an omnivore or a vegan, a carnivore, you probably don't have to because, you know, it's solid meat, and I wouldn't recommend a carnivore diet to anyone. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a vegan or an omnivore or a vegetarian or a pescatarian or whatever the hell you want to call yourself, you should worry about getting enough protein. In the same sense, you should worry about getting too much methionine in your diet and too little glycine in the diet and too little of the other key amino acids. Also, you should worry about too much saturated fat and cholesterol in the diet, which is a primary contributor to arterial stiffness and other things like that. So this idea that you can just eat these high-fat foods and that they're going to promote longevity or a lack of arterial stiffness, I think is not a smart move from a logical standpoint. And that's the problem with this study. The study is flawed because they were testing individual amino acids, not whole foods. So you have to keep that in mind. I also personally supplement with a lot of free-form amino acids because it makes more sense. Like I take glutamine, I take citrulline, which is an arginine precursor, which actually increases arginine or arginine in the body more than arginine or arginine does if you just take it. I also take branched chain amino acids for extra leucine. Okay, you have to, and of course glutamine. And I also use MSG, so I get more glutamic acid. I don't use MSG. I use MSG for flavor, though. And that's my point, is I think what people need to understand is a high-protein diet is potentially healthful, but not in and of itself. You can eat a lot of protein and be very sick, especially you have to look at the source of the protein. The source matters more than the amount, and that's the truth.